Welcome to Put Simply, the podcast that puts what's happening in the world simply without compromising on the details. Erdem Koch is my name, Ozan Ibrisim and Rodney McCune are my co-hosts. Gents, welcome back.
To be with you.
Likewise, guys.
Well, no better person to ask what on earth is happening in the Oval Office and what does Conor McGregor have to do with anything at all? Rodney, take us through it.
Conor McGregor is, as you know, a MMA fighter who Trump name-checked when he met the Irish Prime Minister for the St. Patrick's event as his favourite Irishman. And then he went on, I think, maybe to reference Rory McIlroy, the golfer. Of course, golf's very close to Trump's heart. But I have to say, McGregor holds some distance in the lead as Ireland's most obnoxious man on the global stage at the moment. For him to be invited to the White House, where he unleashed another one of his anti-immigration tirades, was quite something. He is viewed as right-wing, anti-immigration, not so thoughtful with his comments, and probably fits into the type of right groupings that Musk and to a lesser extent Trump have been agitating on behalf of and seeking to support in recent European elections. There is an Irish presidential election in October this year. McGregor has at different points hinted that that's something he may be interested in. I think there was a poll about a year ago which had him around 8%. He is disliked. He's a very divisive character. And of course, 4 months ago, he had a civil action against him that he lost after trial, where he was found civilly liable for rape of a young woman in a Dublin hotel in 2018. So, you know, I guess similar to Trump, he had a similar finding against him in terms of a civil action. I think there's another one pending as well for an incident in Miami in 2023, again, a civil action for some sexual assault. He's made anti-Muslim or Islamophobic comments about some of his opponents from the Caucasus, mocked the death of one of them, I think. The death of the father of one of them during COVID, insulted and verbally abused family members. And he punched an old man in a pub a number of years ago and has an assault conviction in relation to that. He is pretty unpleasant. He's only differentiator maybe from the type of character that the Tate brothers are, is that he was actually reasonably successful at the sporting MMA bit, but in terms of his personality, really unpleasant, really unpleasant. And a lot of the products and brands that he had been associated with have been removed from production or public opportunity to purchase in Ireland since this civil finding was against him. People have sought to disassociate themselves. But of course, Mike Tyson navigated a criminal conviction and a prison sentence to come out and be able to continue with a fame and sporting career. These characters seem to find a way of making these very odd comebacks and trying to win back some public affection and notoriety again. So I expect that he might have a go with the Irish presidency. And of course, like any election, the amount of money and how you wish to divide and wedge certain issues around the election, he may do better than people expect. And of course, name recognition in an election also goes an awful long way. The misogynistic stuff from the Republicans around this previous election was able to cut across race, historic racial voting patterns in America, and who knows what impact it might have in a future Irish election. So I don't expect him to win. I think he may well have a go, and he may well find that he's supported by these right American American right, but rather than right American characters, and similar ones across Europe. And although the Irish presidential position is more ceremonial than uh, with power, it's a 7-year position where you can go again for another 7 years afterwards. So it could keep him in high public profile for some years to come if he were to succeed. But let's all hope he doesn't. He really is obnoxious.
Well, in addition to the Oval Office meeting, I guess, with President Trump, he also appeared in the press briefing room lectern with Press Secretary Caroline Levitt, who said that she couldn't think of a better guest to have with us on St. Patrick's Day. Ozan, I have a feeling you might disagree with that.
Yes, I think your feeling is very much on the money. I could think of thousands of better guests to be at the White House press office, or within a kilometre of the vicinity of the White House than Conor McGregor. I don't need to go any further into what my thoughts about that gentleman is. I think Rodney's done a very good job of summarising it. But it seems to be the prerequisite that it's not in the old days. People would look at whether you were a credible public servant, somebody that actually contributed something of value to society, etc., before you got an invite to the White House. Today, it seems to be that, the longer your rap sheet is, it seems to be that you've got a better chance of getting an invitation to have a private audience with President Trump. So it's getting batshit crazy. I don't know where to start. It really is, from President Trump winning his own golf tournaments, and then Fox News making a big deal of it. I mean, it's got Kim Jong-il kind of cosplay all over it. For those of you who may not know, to put simply, Kim Jong-il was the father of the current leader of North Korea, and the story goes that he convinced his people, which isn't hard to do when they have no access to any other information except for state media or the regime media, that on his first golf game, he was able to get not just one hole in one, but 10 in a row, I believe. And so it's this sort of stuff it really is kind of, who wants to be a dictator type of vibes all over it. It's to add to that, just working through the whole authoritarian kind of theme. President Trump was at an event, and he made a speech at the Department of Justice a few days ago, where he claimed that MSNBC and CNN were singled out, but also other media that write bad things about him and criticize him are all corrupt, and what they're doing is illegal. He mentioned that they're illegal. And this just adds to various other comments that he's made about his political opponents overnight or during the week, during the weekend when he was on Air Force One returning from his golf tournament, which, by the way, I understand that since he's taken office, the taxpayer has had to foot the bill of $18.2 million US for President Trump to go and play golf on the weekends at his own golf courses. So, Doge is doing a great job there cutting expenditure. But on Air Force One, he made a comment that the pardons that President Biden did on his way out were pretty much void, and he believed that they were no longer in effect. And many commentators and correctly point out that his intention is to go after people like Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger. These people were on the January 6th committee, and obviously found that Trump played a very active role in making January 6 riots happen. And he's effectively putting it out there that President Biden's pardon of people like that, which were in some ways, preemptive pardons. He's saying that they're void, and he's trying to pave the way for him to go after these people and use and weaponize the Justice Department, as he has accused the Biden and the Democrats of doing. So yeah, it's all good times. And you know, I remember when we were having a conversation about the Biden pardons, and we're all somewhat horrified about him pardoning, obviously, Hunter Biden and what have you. And we had some questions around whether it's okay to do these sorts of preemptive pardons. But you know, he was right all along, because Trump has had it as part of his plan to go after these people, and Biden saw that, and many people at the time saw that, and have now put pardons in place that have been questioned. So yeah, things are looking up, I've got to say, for our friends in the US. You know, if you've got a pension, I think the 401, which is effectively their pension fund, sitting in the stock market, if you're worried about the price of eggs and all of these sorts of stuff, worry no more, because the government just passed another bill to avert a government shutdown, which is effectively, for those who don't really understand the background to it, is basically it's the law in the US that the US has a debt ceiling, and every time that debt ceiling reaches the top, they need to do what's called a continuous resolution to increase that debt ceiling, and also have an opportunity to kind of keep the government going. But yeah, all those people concerned about their economic well-being shouldn't worry, because basically this budget, with the aid of 10 Democrats in the Senate, and we'll get to that in a minute, I think, but this budget resolution effectively increased the Pentagon budget by $6 billion. So there's another promise that's been broken, and cut the non-defense budget spending by $13 billion. And effectively what that means is it's everything that's outside of defense. So things like community programs, various other social programs, housing programs, all of these sorts of things sit in that category. So they've all been cut by $13 billion. So yeah, it's been a bit of a long kind of report back, but things are getting worse and worse, if you ask me.
Do you think that's the prevailing view in the US and abroad, though, Rodney? I mean, we're seeing polls come out in the US that, you know, some of them are arguing that the Trump is in a much better place now than what he was coming into office in terms of favorability and likability. Definitely much more than the Democrats. What Ozan just said there, in terms of whether things are looking, in simple terms, good or bad, what's your view on sort of where that all sits?
Well, the polling obviously shows that there's a significant number of people who think the country's going in the right direction. That is, his policies around immigration and cutting waste are very popular, although Musk isn't popular, which is what we discussed a number of weeks ago, that he could well be an Achilles heel for Donald Trump at some point. And the failure to deal with the cost of living is an issue for Americans, but not such a big issue that they don't like the idea of throwing foreigners out of the country, taking their money back from Ukraine, and you know, this sort of pivot towards some isolationism and cutting on international aid and so on. So those types of policy moves seem to be able to offset the fact that, you know, there's a potential for the cost of living to get more acute as tariffs bite and so on. Whether that's the same in a few months' time when people have lived through the miserable winter rather than just seeing the first few days of snow and said it's not going to be that bad, we simply don't know yet. And this could take a considerable turn. There is also a slight divergence between the country moving in the right direction and favorability towards Trump, which again is interesting because he must have the credit for the moving in the right direction piece. But he also clearly has some people who just are starting to think they don't really like him. And at this stage, the presidency, although he's better off than he was last time. He's the second lowest rated this early on in a term of anyone apart from him last time. So that on its own, again, shows that he is that divisive character. He may be doing better than he did before, but there's plenty of opportunity for the economic wheels to come off and the shininess of the immigration policies and so on, and cutting foreign aid to start to look a little less bright.
I think it's, to be honest with you, a little bit early to tell, because I think every president has a honeymoon period, and also I think it's been such a chaotic start. Everyone was expecting it. There's no real surprises. He said that he was going to do a lot of these things, so I guess it's more around how he's doing it and the chaos. And I think the numbers in the polls are starting to trend downwards. If you have a look at most of the polls, NBC News, Reuters, they've all got President Trump's approval on a downward trend. But as Rodney said, the right track, wrong track numbers are still pretty solid. Most people still seem to think that the country is going in the right direction. So I think those numbers will take some time to go down. But again, it comes down to a number of things whereby there's been a number of stories that have come out in the media recently of people who voted for Trump and then are realizing that some of their services are getting cut. People who voted for Trump are also realizing that, for example, they might be married to somebody from South America, and that person being arrested and detained. In some cases, I think there was one in Michigan, that person was not able to enter the country despite the fact that the Peruvian wife of this Michigan US citizen was going through the legal routes to get the residency. And it turns out, that this person voted for Trump and thought that it was a great idea to ensure that illegal immigrants are deported, but not realizing that this is a much broad brush kind of approach, and it's not just illegal immigrants that are getting deported. It's many people who are getting deported or being rejected in terms of entry into the US, all these sorts of stuff. So I think the dust needs to settle on all of it before we can really have a good idea of what the polls and what the American people actually think of the job that President Trump is doing.
There's also a subset in there of when they will and when they do and they will deport people in error, who legally shouldn't have been deported. It's inevitable, given the manner in which this is being undertaken. So it's not just hard luck cases of illegals. It's also where they may get it wrong and deport someone who they should never have deported and find out sometime later that it's going to start to look less attractive to the public. And those are the types of things the Democrats need to seize upon. And rather than criticize the stance on immigration, they can criticize the way it's being done as well, or instead, depending on where they think they need to position themselves. But there's an opportunity to criticize the lack of competence in the process without potentially alienating people within a voter demographic they want to attract, who maybe got a slightly tougher view on immigration itself. The other thing which was interesting was how unpopular the pardons for the January 6th people were. And that's again something which the Democrats, when they get their house in order and get organized, need to return to again and again, because it's never going to become better news. Those people can only find themselves on the wrong side of the law again, and they can never improve their standing. And there's opportunities for the Democrats on that, because it was a sort of a single one-off decision, which has the potential for people to reoffend or commit crimes and find themselves back in front of the American justice system, where they can be pointed out that they possibly shouldn't have been released in the first place.
We really should touch on where the Democrats are, because I think that, to me, is one of the big reasons for why I think we have, President Trump is very good at monopolizing the media coverage, stealing all the oxygen, etc. So and he's the president. So that's to be expected. But I think the Democrats are lost, and I think honestly that they need to really, as you said, Rodney, get their house in order, because what we saw over the budget resolution that passed, what Chuck Schumer, I believe, this morning had to cancel a bunch of book tours because he was concerned that there was a significant backlash to his lack of fighting the government shutdown. And I think, there are some Democrats that are doing very interesting things. Bernie Sanders and a number of others are going to red states and holding town halls, because the Republican Congress members have been told by the Republican National Congress Committee, I think it's RNCC, that they should stop holding town halls because of all of the protests that have been taking place over the last couple of weeks. So some Democrats are out there filling that gap and filling that void and trying to make a big issue out of some of the things that are going on. But the Democrats need somebody to rally around, and and that can't be Bernie Sanders or AOC, because let's face it, while they may at this point in time be saying all the right things, they don't have the broad appeal that the Democrats need to try and really bring themselves in a position where they are competitive in the midterms, and even beyond that in 2028 for the presidential election.
But look, the other problem here, right, Ozan, and how many times do we see it in politics? The people who want to be the next person in line don't want to be the next person in line, because the next 2 years, 18 months might just be seen as really hard work for no reward, with the potential for damaging your own reputation. They're all waiting for someone else to do the hard work to try and counter Trump, and then row in behind that and make their own pitch for whatever nominations and so on further down the line. I feel like it's nobody wants to roll up their sleeves and get on with it at the moment, and they're all waiting for someone else to do it so they can benefit further down the line. And
I think
it's a common thing in politicians, as I'm sure you know.
Look, I think you're absolutely right, but I think, as we've already discussed a few times, the system within the US doesn't lend itself to cultivating a proper opposition. I mean, we've discussed that in the UK, Australia, Canada, etc. There is a formal opposition party. There is a formal method by which opposition parties can do things in the parliament, etc. But the system that exists in the US doesn't lend itself to have this sort of thing. The Democrat Party exists, but when it's very clear now, when you don't have a presidential hopeful, everyone's sitting around going, okay, who leads this charge? And I think that's a systematic kind of problem. As much as you're absolutely right, it's also nobody wants to enter into this shitstorm right now and damage themselves. But they have to. I mean, look, at the end of the day, there's plenty of things they can run on.
But also, I think, Ozan, I mean, yes, there's no formal system of holding the government to account like we sort of see in the Westminster systems of Parliament, where the opposition is almost as vocal as the government of the day, because the system allows for it, whether it's through question time in Parliament, etc. But I mean, if you're a young voter, or not even a young voter, if you're a voter who has question marks around the future of the US and some of the actions by Donald Trump and what's happened, where do you go to for content? Where do you go to understand, other than the Put Simply podcast, of course, where do you go to understand get the real analysis of what is happening? And I'm not talking about, flipping to the pages of the New Yorker or the New York Times. And I'm talking about sort of, up-to-date modern content that the Republicans and the MAGA movement are doing so brilliantly and did so brilliantly during the election campaign. There is just very little platform for the simple messaging that needs to go out from the Democrats for people to absorb. And I think in that vacuum, then the MAGA movement, Trump, the Charlie Kirks of the world, they play an important role, and they fill that vacuum very, very, very easily.
Absolutely, you're right, and I think this has been a big weakness of the left, unlike the kind of right and the conservative Republican movement, the MAGA movement. There's a lot of platforms, media outlets, etc. And it's all. I always find it funny when it's it's talking. People are talking about mainstream media. It's controlling the agenda. This couldn't be further from the truth today. I mean, who controls the agenda, and who's the real kind of news providers that people are listening to? They're podcasters, they're independent media, etc. And these are, and also Fox, of being the biggest cable news outlet. But this ecosystem is dominated by the right. However, saying that, I think a lot of people have woken up, and certainly since the 2024 election, in the last 3-4 months, you are seeing a massive increase in number of subscribers, number of people turning to more the kind of center or the left versions of what we used to see in people like Joe Rogan, Ben Shapiro, etc. Many of the left versions of those are gaining such popularity that, in fact, Joe Rogan, for the first time in about 2 years, got knocked off the first spot in terms of the downloaded podcasts by an organization called the Midas Touch. And if you listen to the Midas Touch podcast after you listen to Put Simply, obviously, you will find that that it is super anti-Trump. It's very, very I won't say very left-wing, because it's run by a bunch of brothers and people who don't necessarily come from a left background, but they're very much trying to do what the Democrats should be doing in a lot of ways, and holding the Trump administration to account. But there is a big threat, Adam, and I mentioned at the top that when you've got Donald Trump running around threatening the CNBCs and the CNNs, etc., who are massive businesses, usually owned by even bigger parent companies, etc., saying what they're doing is illegal and he's going to take action, etc., it really does pose the question that if you're an independent, left-leaning podcaster who's got 3-4 million followers, do you really take some of the risks? And a lot of people are stepping up and showing that they're going to kind of provide facts, they're going to provide news, all of the things that you talked about for those young people who are disillusioned about what's going on today in the US or the world generally. Many of these media outlets are providing this, however, at the risk of being punished by the Department of Justice, which is effectively just another wing of MAGA right now. So that is a concern. And, again, it makes me laugh every time I hear how Donald Trump talked about the Department of Justice under Biden being weaponized against him, etc. It's the classic projection. Basically their accusations are their confessions, and he's doing exactly the same thing, if not at a worse level than what we saw under Biden.
I don't like the Midas touch because, unlike on Put Simply, I find the accents of the people who do the content quite irritating a lot of the time. So
Yes.
we're well ahead on that, Ozan, if that's okay.
Luckily, our accents are very neutral. The three accents we have on this podcast, boys.
International accents, yeah. I mean, our positioning in the Spotify rankings have got to be going up. I mean, with this wonderful content that we're producing.
Yeah, it was amazing. Good.
Well, within hours of recording this podcast, President Trump is going to have an important phone call by all standards with President Putin of Russia. This, of course, comes to the agreement in Saudi Arabia last week to have a ceasefire in Ukraine, and all eyes were then turned to Vladimir Putin to see whether he would agree to it or not. It also comes, of course, off the back of the collapse of another ceasefire in the Middle East, with Israeli bombs once again hitting the Gaza Strip. More than 300 Palestinians are said to have been killed in the last 24 hours. Rodney, when it comes to ending wars, do you think Trump is living up to the promise that he gave during the campaign?
Well, it's like a little bit of the Earth was made in 7 days, and the discussion about whether it actually meant 7 days or was 7 equal phases of development. That day is used as a reference on his "I'll end it in the first day" or "I'll end it on my first day in office." We don't really know, and maybe Ozan wants to touch at some point to the fact that one day, in terms of its definition under US laws, now changed anyway. So no, he hasn't done it early. He has made some effort, but he's done it by undermining Ukraine, obviously, to push them together. And I suspect this call with Putin today will be for Trump to simply read out whatever he's been asked to say as a result of it. The intentions of the Russians remain unclear, especially whilst they're on the front foot. They have nearly moved the Ukrainian forces out of Kursk, where they were occupying Russian territory. There's still a small piece of that left. But even when it came to saying, the Russians were saying they had the Ukrainians surrounded and cut off and so on, Trump was out saying word for word the same thing, and it wasn't true. So I honestly do feel that this call will be about helping to coach him on whatever lines they want them to say, and then we'll really find out what game the Russians want to play in terms of spinning this out to allow further land grab whilst they reach the point of agreement where they can have a ceasefire. And then that brings me on to, I think, Gaza and what's happening there. A ceasefire is only that. It's a temporary device. You need to be working at the same time to secure the longer form of the agreement in order to stop drifting back into conflict. And that seems to be really sadly what's happening in Gaza and Israel, the breathing space and the opportunity to try and create something that's not what was ongoing conflict just hasn't been seized. And it was interesting that St. Patrick's Day event last night in Singapore, the Irish ambassador on the one or two foreign policy points that always get inserted in what's quite a soft speech, both related to Ukraine and Russia and Israel and Gaza, and the need to work to secure ceasefires in relation to both those conflicts. And that's something which, on a day where Ireland punches very well above its weight globally, that's been sent out across many of these types of events with foreign ambassadors in country, as well as dignitaries from the governments and so on. And yeah, those are it was the right 2 points to highlight, because that's still the big two global stability challenges we have until the next one, wherever that may be. But currently active situations, and I know there's obviously Syria as well, is now sliding into a increased level of day-to-day violence. These two conflicts really need to have some resolution.
Well, before we get into a bit more detail on those fronts, Ozan, what is this reference that Rodney made about the definition of a day changing or something?
Yeah, so and I'm surprised that this didn't get a lot more publicity, but it turns out that a day in Congress no longer refers to a calendar day, according to a resolution that they passed. Now, the background to this is, I understand that in this session of sitting, in this first session of sitting, there is an opportunity for the Democrats to bring forward a motion, and they have to give a certain number of days' notice before it can be put to be debated. But this motion would effectively prevent the president's ability to willy-nilly throw tariffs around as bargaining tools and all of this sort of stuff. And if we just step back a little bit, as you well know, or as people may be aware, that President Trump has declared a state of emergency. Hence, he has the powers under that state of emergency on the border to be able to impose tariffs. And of course, he's taken it much further and is now imposing tariffs on steel and aluminium, which is impacting, our home country, Erdem, and many other countries, etc. So it's become a bit of a kind of economic tool. But coming back to what the Democrats can do, according to the rules of the Congress, they can give notice and a number of days passes and they can debate it. However, the Republicans have passed this resolution as part of this budget process that basically says that for the definition of Congress, one day is not the equivalent of a calendar day, which then means that the number of days required to give in terms of give notice is not enough before the end of the sitting period. So they're doing a lot of interesting things, but they're now defining what a day is, and it's truly a very interesting thing. And it reminds me, I used to be involved in student politics, back in the old days, and this is a stunt that we would have kind of pulled in a student union conference, and we would have afterwards gone to the pub and gone, "Oh, what a great stunt that was." And knowing full well that it was very cheeky and ridiculous, but we would have achieved our outcome in our little small political, social, student politics world. But this is now happening in the biggest and most powerful country in the world.
And I'm sure your stunts were limited to your student politics days, Ozan. I'm sure when you got into real politics, there were no stunts pulled.
So I learned my lesson during my student politics days.
Speaking of people who is very early on learning the game and, well, arguably even stunts, according to some, is the new Prime Minister of Canada just after a week of being sworn in and replacing Justin Trudeau. The new Prime Minister's on a bit of a world tour, Rodney.
Yeah, well, look, he's gone to the UK, he's gone to meet King Charles, and that's quite timely given the role King Charles has in terms of Canada's constitution. He then met Keir Starmer, and then he went to Macron, which ticks the French component of Canadian population off very nicely. And I think he declared that Canada was the most European country outside Europe. So we are seeing a change in global alliances and who's placing their trust with who. And I think it's a smart move from Carney early on. He does also have this very strange situation where he has to, he wasn't, on becoming leader, he didn't actually have a seat in Parliament, and that needs to be rectified. So we're going to have to have elections, I'm sure, shortly on that. But in terms of not snubbing Trump, but not focusing on it, he's gone to do other things. He also said very tellingly at a press conference, which the UK and Canada decided not to have separately, presumably so things that Trump had said about one couldn't be put to the other to try and cause some division. He had said that, the Canadian economy is still whatever, a tenth of the US economy, so they can't go dollar for dollar on every tariff. So that's also a little bit of a signal that they're prepared to have a sensible discussion at the right point in time as well. So he's had a good start. He's made the right early decisions and hasn't looked like he's a hostage to Trump trying to negotiate his way out of being the 51st state or whatever it happens to be that Trump claims he is the governor of, or his predecessor, and presumably him shortly.
51st state, yeah. But not enough gets made out of the fact that, Mark Carney has a very, very interesting background and interesting bio. He not only was the governor of the Bank of Canada, but he was also the governor of the Bank of England, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah.
So, this stuff, the symbolism is very strong. And whilst I'm offended that Australia is not the most European country outside of Europe, and I take offense at that whole statement, there's some serious kind of maneuvering going on between Europe, and you're seeing it in the tariffs. It in my opinion, if you had told me 10 years ago that a US president would do what they're doing in terms of imposing tariffs, abandoning their allies when it comes to foreign security, all of this sort of stuff. And if you had told me that there would be such resistance from the likes of Canada, Europe, etc., I wouldn't have believed you. But I think, what is happening is quite interesting, because it demonstrates also that the US under Trump, and some could argue under Biden, is losing a lot of its ability to throw its weight around politically, economically, and all of these sorts of things. That I think, Europe was instantly ready to retaliate on the tariffs. Canada's been, the Canadians are very angry. In fact, they're so angry that we talk about Trump's political comeback being the greatest in history. I've got to say the Liberal Party in Canada, if they keep going the way they are going to pull off what could be the greatest comeback, political comeback in history. Because for those of listeners that are not aware, the Conservatives in Canada were up maybe 20 or 30 percentage points only 3-4 months ago, and it was going to be a complete and utter demolition of the Liberal Party, which is, of course, Justin Trudeau's party. And the most recent polls are showing. One poll showed, I think, overnight that the Liberals have edged ahead in if there was an election tomorrow. But most of the polls are, I think, showing that gap has narrowed so much that it's become a very competitive election later on in the year. And again, Conservatives got no one else but their good friend President Trump to blame for that, because I don't think the Liberal Party could have asked for a better miracle than Donald Trump, because it's basically rallied all of the Canadians around the flag. And not only that it's some of the ways that Justin Trudeau has handled it has now meant that people are like, okay, we're standing up to the US. And this, maybe I'm wrong, but for me, this is something very unusual, because I wouldn't have expected people to stand up so strongly against what Trump's doing.
But in a sense, he's forced them to do that because he's left them with a little other choice. But you're right about how it's caused a bounce back in the polls in Canada. In fact, Trudeau possibly could have stayed on, given his own approval figures were on a massive upturn because he stood up to Trump. But Carney's just a little bit boring for me, but I'm sure that his great experience that he brings, both economic policy and political skill, because he was Bank of England governor during the whole Brexit fiasco.
Rodney,
we just bring a lot of experience to Canada,
We just need more boring in politics, please. I've had enough. I can't deal with. I'm very happy with Carney. We just need to kind of now transfer that to other places. I've come to the conclusion that boring politicians are good. We want more of them, and we want politics to be boring again.
Make politics boring again. What a great thing to campaign on. You may have just written the new election slogan there. Ozan, won't be the first time in your professional career, but there you go. Let's see who picks it up. Gents, another non-boring week to end this podcast. Thank you so much for your time. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And that's been this week's episode of Put Simply. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn at Oroku Group to stay up to date with all the latest episodes and news. Feel free to leave a comment and suggestions on what you'd like to see featured on the podcast as well. Until next time, I'm Erdem Koch.
And I'm Ozan Ibrisim.
Thanks for listening.